welcome to episode 4 of Under the Pallet Wrap with me, Keith Dupres, and Dan Culverhouse. Thanks for all your support so far, we have to say. Very grateful. Very surprised at the amount of subscribers, listeners, and viewers. Today, our subject is getting out of the way. Quite broad, but that's good. Hopefully, we can go off on a bit of a tangent. Ultimately, we're talking about leaders. When do you get in the way of a process? When are you the blocker as a leader in the supply chain? And what does good leadership mean? I've got a confession to make. One of my biggest management lessons was understanding that I was getting in the way of my team. I got a bit of an ego boost being the go-to. I would admit it got a lot of pride in it. Everyone asking me questions, especially around customs regulations, international trade, is a bit of a badge of honour. But I was staying at work till 11 o'clock at night, trying to manage all the complexities of that. And it used to bug me on every journey home. Why am I doing all the work? Until a light bulb appeared on top of my head and I realised, well, no one knows the answers to these questions. No wonder I'm answering them all. And that was the biggest gateway for me for leadership. I think it changed my entire perspective. I decided to set up a trainer's role in the team, taught her gradually, started understanding like what levels of understanding people in the team would need, set up training. She took that off my hands and lo and behold, I had an engaged team. I wasn't staying till 11 o'clock every night. We went from strength to strength from there. It's opened up my life. But Dan, what about you? I mean, what does it mean to you, getting in the way?
Well, I guess thank you for your confession, Keith. It's very open of you to admit to the things you've gotten wrong in the past. But it's the best way to learn. Right? But I think there's two kind of distinct parts to this, in the sense that sometimes it's you getting in the way and sometimes it's people getting in your way, both of which are equally bloody frustrating. But yeah, so I think when I think of when either people are getting in my way or I'm getting in people's way, what generally happens is that you become this single point of failure in a team, in a process, in a function, and you get to a point where it feels like that nobody will make a decision without you, and they won't move ahead until you go, yes, you're right, that's okay, you can do it. And which effectively means that as the leader, you're not passing on any accountability to your team. So they'll work hard, they'll get on with it, but they'll reach a point and then they'll wait, and they'll wait for you. And if you don't recognize that, of course, it can get really frustrating that why is this not happening? Why is things not moving forwards? And it's because you've never said to them, it's your decision. I trust you, you make it. If you don't do that, then people will assume you're the boss. We think this is right, and they'll send it up to you. Maybe they'll drop you an email, and because you're busy, you don't read it, so you don't know. And I've also seen it, particularly in founders of businesses, when they're kind of in that scaling, growing stages, that they hold all the relationships, all the external relationships. The main relationship holder is the founder, and therefore, if anybody else contacts an outside contractor or supplier or partner and asks them to do something, you tend to find, well, as so-and-so said, that's okay. Because they see that person as the sole decision maker. Yeah, go on.
Absolutely. I feel, yes, so the big barometer is when someone goes on holiday, isn't it? What happens?
It exposes a lot.
Yeah. When the approver goes on holiday, everything grinds to a halt.
Or they find that you never go on holiday because you just feel like you cannot. Something
glued to the phone, glued to the laptop. No one really I think one of the biggest dangers is when no one actually notices when things are going wrong because they don't have the authority or the permission to question uh, the status quo. So things get left. You can get annoyed with your team. I probably have another confession. Why didn't you notice this going wrong? Well, you never really gave us the autonomy to get involved. We just assumed because you were in control that you had it covered.
In
Some
so
of my biggest learning.
in so many businesses, responsibility is assumed and not stated. You do meet some very organized people that will have clear frameworks and structures, and they'll have racy documents that says this person's responsible for this decision, this person's accountable, these are who you should consult with, and these are who you should inform. But it's a rarity. It's not the common. In bigger businesses, I think it's more common. But as a business is scaling, those responsibilities are kind of adopted over time through necessity normally, and it normally takes something to happen for there to be a kind of a moment of like something needs to change because this is a problem. It's it's amazing when you step into a company from the outside and you're kind of looking at the way things are working, and it can feel like it's amazing that it doesn't fall over more. But people are very good at adapting to whatever is the norm. And if it's the norm that the founder makes the decision or the supply chain director makes the decision, then his team or their team will just do everything they can up until that point, and then they'll wait. And of course, if the supply chain director or the founder is I need to make all these decisions, so then they'll be on it all the time and they'll always be switched on. They'll never turn off because they know they have to make these decisions, because if they don't, this damn team never does anything. But in the height of it all, they never get the opportunity to sit back and dwell and think, why is this? Why is it like this? Or how have I got to this point? I've built this business up. I'm this leader of this team they're quite good at what they do. But they never take any responsibility, or they never make a decision, or why do they ask me every damn thing? And the reality normally is because as time's gone along, you've insisted on it at times, and therefore people won't make the decision themselves. It's sometimes that it takes a brave person to say to the boss, "You just need to get out of the way and let us get on with it."
We think someone like either of us working as a consultant, to be honest. It's the first time they've allowed themselves to have someone from the outside tell them what might be wrong. I've worked with so many founders where I've had to explain gently that they are the biggest blocker of all. It's not people's capability, it's just they haven't been able to express it. And often it's a bit enlightening, it's a bit of a shock. Especially when they talk of recruitment issues, trust, knowledge, capability. Have you really allowed this person to do what you employed them to do? I've spoken to managers who are managing shipping labels. That's what they're doing all day long. They're not exercising their mind. They've got plenty of ideas, but they tend to take a back seat after a couple of months because what can they ever do? Teams get siloed because you all need to cling onto the founder's time. So you're all working he's only dealing with you or she is dealing with you separately. So you tend to, by default, fall into silos. Everyone's going through the one person. So you're never talking to each other. What about systems? Have you ever had an example where the system is the blocker, the platform, everyone's so loyal to it, they won't change it, or they're unaware of its capabilities, perhaps?
I think a system, or even just a process. It doesn't even have to be driven by a system. Sometimes it can just be that this is the process we follow, and it might be driven by a system, but it's not always. It's just become the adopted way, and people become slaves to it. I've been in so many operations where when you're walking around for the first time, well, why do you do it that way? Oh, well, we always have. Ever since we were small, we've done it this way. And, or, our manager tells us we have to do it that way. And so we do it. And, if you ask them, they can normally tell you 20 different ways of doing it they think are better. But, they've never felt it's their place or it's not their job to make that decision. So they don't. And particularly when it comes to founders, when someone's built a business, and as it starts to get bigger, potentially things need to change. I kind of have a little bit of sympathy as to why they don't. When it's your baby, when you've created this, it's kind of hard to let it go, right? I mean, it is a challenge to trust someone else, and in particular with smaller businesses, because when they recruit a team, there is a tendency to recruit quite junior, lower paid people because you don't have a lot of funds when you're starting, right? So you tend to employ junior people to do some doing while you continue to make all the decisions. And then as your business grows, this gap between what you can successfully achieve as a founder and what your team's capability is becomes bigger and bigger. And that's generally when somebody will reach out to an external consultant to try to understand it, or they may decide, I'm going to take a fractional person on to be able to fill some of that gap. But it takes a moment of realization to see it. And even when you do, talk to a founder and they recognize it, and maybe you come in and you start working with them to help them kind of, rearrange and restructure how decisions get made and who should do what, you still meet serious resistance because they feel like they simply cannot let go. They just cannot take that decision and give it to somebody else. It's almost like it's a pathological challenge for them because they've just owned it, and they feel like nobody understands their business like they do, and they're probably right. But that doesn't mean that you can't take chunks of what you do and let somebody else take some ownership of it, because any other way it's not sustainable. And I've met people that are doing some nice businesses that are starting to do well, and they're just hitting a blocker. They can't go any further because the founder or founders or leadership team, which tend to be quite small in those days, they just can't let go of anything because it feels like it's not clear enough, it's not structured enough. I don't know that I can explain it to anybody, and therefore they end up stuck in this cycle. It does take people in roles like we do that don't have that vested interest in their own personal job to sometimes just have to give people the brutal truth, right? And then you have to do it in the right way, but see, sometimes you have to be clear on it. I mean, for you in your experiences, Keith, have you ever really had to just lay it out to a foundation that you just need to get on and do your marketing stuff and let us get on with the operation? I mean, have you ever had to have that conversation?
In a word, yes. Yes. It normally works out very well. Can't say it has every time, but if that is the reality and that's what they've employed me to tell them, of course I confront them with that. With a diagnostic, I often go about looking at the organisation and the structure of the team and the tasks the team complete to understand whether they've got an even, broad knowledge base. What are people doing? What's their job title? How much are they taking on? That's part and parcel of the job, I think, as an ops director, as a fractional leader, just taking a look at what you've got, what they're doing, how capable they are. Some of my capability strategies have been an eye-opener to, I would say, old school managers. I think I've had some opposition in the past when people think that their team don't want to know how capable they are, but they're generally 99% of the time, of course people do. They want to know how capable they are. They want to know how close they are to an expert. And I think it's quite freeing to know what you need to know, what you know now, Otherwise, you run the risk of thinking you know everything when there's a whole universe out there to know. And it's not just about the job you do, it's about what's beyond the job. It's how to build your career and develop the business, develop your career within the business, and help with the growth and take them to the next level. I was going to ask you a question, Dan, which is, do you ever think that hands-on micromanagement ever has its place? Do you see it ever working?
Um, I think it does for a period, right? When things are new, when even if you're starting up a new operation, I think it needs that that person that's really been the architect of it, the creator of it, to have that micromanagement, that kind of real investigative, kind of close forensic view on what's going on. But it doesn't need it forever. They're once through their forensic approach, hypercare, you see it working. The very next step is, okay, how do I step away? Because otherwise, you never will, right? I think in smaller businesses it's much more prevalent because it tends to be the founder, and it means it's more than just a job. It's it's normally their life, right? I mean, they put everything on the line for these businesses. So getting them to let go is really hard, but necessary. And would you ever tell a founder that they just need to wake up and move? Should, in your view, maybe that's not a fair question. In your view, should founders step completely away and let the operators get on with it and leave themselves to be in the marketing and the selling and is that the right way forward for you?
I think there's nuances. Is it right that they should ever disappear completely? I mean, I don't think that's what we're saying, but certainly I think when you're a generalist and suddenly the requirement becomes a specialist requirement, that's your time to maybe let the expert work a bit more independently and consult with you. It's like a spectrum of anything, isn't it? You get extreme micromanagers who are actually good at other things and good managers in other ways. And those that are so hands off that you haven't got a clue where they are, everything is disorganized. It's the complete opposite of getting in the way. You're getting in the way by not being in the way, by being completely absent. That's happened before. Again, it sometimes comes down to not recruiting correctly, not having the right knowledge in the right place as time goes by. So the easiest thing to do is just not be there. There's so many reasons. I was going to say to you, have you ever been in a position where you've micromanaged? What do you think drives that level of micromanagement? Why do some people never give it up?
I have. I don't think I'm a natural micromanager, by the way. I think I've always had this desire. Maybe I'm just lazy and I like to share my work, but I don't know. But I can remember not so long ago. So I was in a very senior position, and we had a new operation go live, and it didn't go well. It went badly wrong, actually, to the extent that I had to go and effectively take over. It was really not doing what it should, and I ended up as the de facto ops manager of the site, which I feel strongly today that it was necessary. That what had gone on there, it was necessary for somebody to go in and just take control and build and rebuild it back to the process as it should be. Now that process actually took about 2 years to get to what it should be, and I was definitely not the ops manager for that long. I had about 18 other countries to worry about, but over a period of about 3 months, I'd gone from rescuing this thing from just falling apart to having this fledgling operation kind of working, getting through the day, getting through the orders. And we kind of settled into a cycle. And every day I was in there at 6 o'clock in the morning, directing everybody, making sure everything was happening, going on, and then at like 8, 9 o'clock at night, I collapse into a hotel bed, and do the same again the next day. And we'd got ourselves into this place where we got rid of the immediate pressure. The operation was delivering. It wasn't very good. It was expensive. It wasn't efficient, and we weren't always accurate. We were making a lot of mistakes, but we were moving. But I'd kind of got myself into this kind of scenario, and I just couldn't see it. I don't even know that I could say that I couldn't see a way out. I wasn't looking for a way out. It had just become what I needed to do every day. I was just in fix it, do it mode. And it actually took one of the commercial leaders of the business, when he visited one day to see me, and we were quite close friends, he just pulled me to one side and said, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "What do you mean?" He says, "This has been going on for 3 months now. You're still running this place. Where's the ops team? Where's the team underneath you that you're trying to let it go to?" And it was just kind of like one of those moments, he's right. What the hell am I doing? And I think it was just the scale of the problem was such, and the consequences of failing were so high, because we weren't talking about your average can of beans. This was, medical products. So customers not getting their medications and stuff was pretty serious. So I think I just got myself into this. I just needed to keep this thing going. But in doing so, I never got to the point of saying, right, okay, it's kind of working now. I need to start to bring these ops managers back in and take over. And it just took someone to give me a bit of a shake and say, "Dan, you've got another 18 countries that are not having your time. You need to fix this." And it was just a wake up call. And of course, I went through a process over a couple of weeks of really kind of making sure we brought everyone in, and then I was able, and my wife was quite pleased as well, because this wasn't in the country we were living; it was in another country, so I was able to go home and see the family. But yeah, as an experienced senior leader, I had got myself into that fix it mode, and it needed somebody to poke me to get me out of it. It's
Yeah, I think the example I used right at the beginning taught me more than any book ever could, just in the fact that you fall into the habit. You take on so much responsibility and forget to be a leader. You become a manager, but not a leader. No one can take that level of responsibility and pressure daily for too long before it becomes a blocker to productivity as a leader, because you can't be everywhere at once. And I think it's a common trap that we often fall into. I think there's some people more susceptible than others, but I think we're all susceptible when there's those critical moments that are high stake. We want them to go right, but within that, there are those moments that you have to bring people along for the ride.
Have you ever had people underneath you tell you that you need to get out of the way, or that you need to let them pick up stuff? I mean, because it takes quite a brave person to do that to a boss. I mean, it depends what kind of a boss you are. But has anyone ever actually come to you and said, why can't we do any of this? Why do you do everything?
I'd like to think certainly in the latter part of my career, I've built that psychological safety where people can say what they mean, and they probably have, and it's probably been so easy to do that I don't remember them as stories. I encouraged people to question me. In the earlier days, yes, I think without a doubt I was told, like, not aggressively, just I want to do that, and I think I've always had the presence of mind to actually pay attention to the team, and sometimes I probably haven't agreed. There's probably been reasons for that, but most of the time I've taken it on board. I think I've always listened to constructive feedback. I've never said to teams, like, you have to address me in a perfect way. I'm perfectly happy for people to say things that others might consider slightly out of turn. We all have our ways of communicating.
Yeah.
Never had anyone be outright rude to me, but I've had people tell me the honest truth, and I encourage that.
Yeah, and it's absolutely. I think any good leader would encourage this team to stand up. Have you done it to your boss before? Told him that he's wrong or she's wrong, and that she needs to get out of the way, or let you take on something? Because it's
Yeah,
easy to create that environment or feel like you're creating that environment for your team, and then maybe getting frustrated if they don't do it. But the question is, have you ever done it? Have you ever gone to your boss and say, you know what, if you carry on like this, we're going to crash and burn, or we're never going to grow because you don't let us take it on? That's a brave thing to do, right?
yeah, I think I have. I know I have. Particular examples are not flooding my mind, but yes, questioning. I've always been a questioning pain in the ass. Even as a child, I've always asked questions. It's just my nature. Just keep asking.
I had a boss that doesn't listen, though, that you're telling them and they're just, it's just falling on deaf ears, and they continue to do things that are, disruptive or blocking growth, and stopping things move forward. I mean, if you've been in that, you've got a bloody minded boss that doesn't want to listen.
Yes, I've had a lot of that experience too. I mean, all my bosses have taught me a great deal, and I value all of them. Uh, but of course, there have been moments where decisions have been managed for me, and I haven't agreed that the outcome has been as successful as it would have been if the expert in that matter was left to it. Um,
And have you
but you
sucked
never
up,
learn.
or have you done something about it in the sense of, well, sometimes the only thing you can do is walk away, right? But have you got to that, or have you always been able to find a way?
No, I think I probably walked away on occasion, walked away,
Yeah.
and sometimes from the role eventually, because it's not the environment I want to be in if you don't have an input or an impact. So, um,
Doesn't that make you a
yes,
quitter? Doesn't that make you a quitter? If you
it's a good question, but it put me on the spot. Quitter. If I'm honest, I think it's a inflammatory word, quit, isn't it? Because what does quit mean? Sometimes you should
yeah,
quit. Sometimes you
the
should quit.
connotation guy is you're giving up. Right? So,
Yeah, the bravest thing to do is quit sometimes. Walk away from something that's not serving anybody well. Um, Walk away from a project, or well, telling people why, but walking away from a project when you say, look, it's over. It's not. It's done. Either it hasn't worked. We need to readapt. We need to start again. That's that's brave. That's not quitting. That's making it clear that you've exhausted the options in one particular way. To just walk off because you disagree with an opinion, yeah, that's quitting. And no, I don't think that's right in any occasion. I'd like to think there's always space for discussion. Um,
I don't
I
think your
have
team always
witnessed,
appreciates it either if you walk away and leave them to it.
I've I've witnessed people walk away and wipe their hands of particular projects and tasks. I think when that happens, it's best to let them, in many respects, for the morale of the rest of the team. Uh, every situation's slightly different, isn't it? But
It
I
is,
think,
because it's like, some people you can give feedback to, right? And some people, I don't care how carefully or how nicely you do it, they just don't. People sometimes, particularly if they are a boss, I work with founders, so I say this with love. Founders can be particularly tricky with that because they have such a drive, such a belief in what they're doing that it becomes very difficult for them to listen. I worked for a business a while back, and I worked for the founder, and the funniest thing is that they recruited me because of my knowledge and because of my experience in change, in managing change, in making change happen. And then every time I suggested a change, it got blocked. Yeah, I wanted to go. I just felt that this is, and when it is a founder, it's their business. There's no moving them, right? It's like if you're in a bigger business and you've got a boss who's a problem, there's always the potential to go to their boss and try to explain we've got a real problem here. That if we don't resolve this, and I'm not getting anywhere with this person, so I'm I don't like it, but I've had to come to you for the sake of because I think the business is suffering for it. You can do that, but when it's a founder and it's their business, that's the only way. And it's and if they're not having it, then it can have a real detrimental effect on their business, but also have a real detrimental effect on you, on your well-being, on your ability to do your job, your ability to enjoy your job. And this is when I think sometimes the only thing to do is to go, because if they're not going to listen and you're not able to do what they gave you the job to do, then you have to say there's no point in me doing it. But that's not saying that you should give up easily, though. In that case, I did win in the end, and it took some executive coaching. And it's really funny. Me and my boss got to a point where we were really not getting on very well, and so as part of the outcome of a performance review we had, I was given an executive coach to sort me out. Which actually was fantastically valuable for me, because it taught me how to handle this kind of situation and these types of people that find it very hard to see past what they think is right. And it just took a real focus of taking on it bit by bit and really enforcing the conversation to include, this is why I'm saying this. This is the detail. So being able to prove it, really kind of bit by bit, and accepting it's going to take time and over a period of time, by really directing her attention to the right things and breaking down barriers bit by bit, instead of just trying to sell the whole thing and just take it bit by bit. I eventually got her to see that I truly knew what I was talking about. I had truly thought about it in enough detail, could answer every query. So when she kind of said, I just don't think it'll work, you really have to be, why do you think that? What is it that you think is and then if you can get her to admit to something, then you can say, well, let me show you what I mean by that, and let me show you that bit and how that will work, and why your fears are unfounded. And you break that barrier, and then you start on the next one. And eventually I did get what I needed and got the change that we needed to do, but it was hard work, and I definitely could have walked away from it, because it was one of those things that no amount of feedback seemed to make any difference. And I think it's true with some people. They need to fail to see it happen. They need it to fall apart to recognize their role in that happening.
You used an interesting phrase, win. And the aim is always win-win, isn't it? It's everyone to win. So not just one person, but everyone to win, for everyone to align and deliver what's best for the business. And something
I didn't want to win that debate so I could help the business win. I was so sure that they would not win if we hadn't made this change. But
of course, different scenarios in every case. But one thing I've learned is, as a coach, is active listening, and you tend to pick up some pointers in that respect when you're conversing. Like, what are these triggers? What are the things that seem to meet the most resistance? And it's what fascinates me about people. It's what fascinates me about business. Just everybody's coming at it with their own angle, their own passions, their own skill sets, and we continue to learn every single day. Now, you mentioned a point about failing to succeed. Have you ever had anyone in your team where you've really wanted to help them? You've managed them, you've told them, you've given them tips, you've tried to coach them. But because as employees, we need critical, constructive feedback as well. Have you ever managed anyone who's been completely oblivious to that type of feedback? So the only thing you can do is let them find out for themselves?
Yeah, for sure. I can think of a number of people, and I definitely wouldn't want to give too much detail because they'd probably recognise it. But yeah, I've worked, and it's actually been a real challenge of mine as I go through management and leadership, of having this almost pathological need for people to succeed and for people to learn and to get over their hurdles. And some people just don't want to, right? Some people just want to see what they're doing. They just want to do it in a certain way, and that's that. And others just aren't wired in the right way to be successful in certain. So you do get these people that get into these roles, and they're just not in the right role. It's not that they're terrible people or they're rubbish or they're untalented, but their talents are just not in the job that they're in. And I've definitely been guilty of trying to get people to that point for too long without going, you know what, this is not going to work. You need to move. I need to move you to something else. Or sometimes, sadly, you need to move them out of the business. And it's horrible. I've got much better at it. I think I've learned that if I can make it make sense in my head that the right thing to do is to release them so they can go and often be successful in other areas where I can see they have better skills, then I've become much more comfortable with doing that. And I generally find that people accept it and understand it. And a lot of people I've had to do that too, I'm still friends with now. So,
it's part of contributing to their success. Seeing them thrive in another area, you've contributed to that. And quite often, people will come back to you and say, "Oh, look, I'm just going from leaps and bounds now, and I'm really enjoying my new career." I've often switched my teams around, and it's been the best thing to do.
It's all about how you deliver it, right? It's because we've talked about, is it feedback or do people need to fail to move forward? Feedback can be hugely powerful, right? But it takes two things. It takes you to be open to accepting it. You need to be open, willing to hear things that are uncomfortable and maybe hurt a little bit. Because if you're not, then it doesn't matter how well it's delivered, it's never gonna penetrate. But secondly, I think feedback is very situational. That if it's done at the wrong time and in the wrong scenarios, doesn't matter how beautifully and how eloquently or carefully it's done. If somebody is in an emotional state or you're still in the midst of a crisis, it's going to fall on deaf ears and it's going to fail and it's never going to land. So I think you can be a very skilled giver of feedback, for want of a better phrase. But if you can't choose the right time and recognize the state of mind of the person that you're giving it to, then it's never going to deliver. Whereas the one thing about failure is most people can see, you can't get past it. This failed on your watch. And it's a powerful, powerful lesson to learn. I love hiring people that have failed and that can openly admit that, I did this, I got it wrong, and it really screwed things up. But I learned. Right? It's one of my favorite quotes is experience is a brutal teacher, but we learn. My God, we learn. And it really encompasses how brutal sometimes failure can be. But once you've been through it, it's the best training you could ever have, right? Because you never want to go back there because it's bloody awful. And I think that's why, for me, failure is always much more powerful than feedback because, you can't hide from it. It happens and it really gets you. And it's not just that you learn from it, you just don't want to go through it anymore. But here's a question for you then. Can you avoid it altogether? Can you avoid all that confrontation? Can you get a founder in a right place or a manager in a right place so this never occurs? How do you do the early stage work to prevent that happening?
I don't think it's right to avoid difficult moments. I think you live through it together. I think you can apply frameworks to make it a smoother journey. You can share the vision. You can build your roadmap. You can bring everyone on board. We can all do that. We can all work in unison. But life is never tension-free. There's always critical moments that you haven't experienced before that crop up, and these really expose the practicality in the team and working together well. I don't think you can be a great leader.
You
I've
can
had great
minimise it,
leaders.
right?
I'd like to be. I'd like to think I'm a great leader, but I'd like to think I can talk about and promote good leadership. But I don't think it's right to pretend that you can build a seamless, perfect operation without any form of tension.
But there are things you can do that minimise the chances. Right? I think
Yes.
it's about structure. It's about frameworks. It's about strategy a lot of the time. People that say, "Oh, we're a new business. We haven't got time for strategy." Well, in my mind, strategy can change every few months. In an early business, but you need to be able to think past the end of the day, the end of the week, the end of the month, because otherwise you will always be working 7 days a week, 18 hours a day, just to keep the wheels turning, and there's no fun in that after a while. That's not the way that you really, when you started this business, that you envisaged. And so a bit of structure, a bit of process management, a bit of planning. When in small business, sometimes planning feels like it's a swear word of like, that's just all that does is
Yes.
it blocks us off, stops us being agile. I'm sorry, that's BS, right? Planning means that you can focus on the get on with doing, and then you can adapt. A plan that you don't have to be a slave to a plan, but having a plan gives you a bloody good start, and you can always adapt in it. And yeah, so I think there are things you can do to minimize.
Yeah, reactive as opposed to future proofing. Celebrate the wins.
Celebrate them as well. You should celebrate them because they are gifts. They teach you things, right? You learn from. So, whilst it may have felt a bit like today was a discussion on leadership style, which ultimately it was, but it is very relevant to if you're running in a supply chain operation. This is a common challenge, wouldn't you say?
Well, for sure. We said that these discussions were going a tangent, and I'm glad this one did. If I could offer one last thought on what every supply chain leader should probably do at one stage is measure something. Just even if it's one thing, it's always been the place I've tended to start.
Yeah, well, I think that last comment was a really nice one. Supply chain management is about management, and you need to measure to be able to manage, because what you measure gets managed, right? And we'll be back again next week, where we'll have another hot topic. And hopefully, you've enjoyed this one. Please do subscribe, hit that subscribe button, and we would also love to hear any comments that you have. What do you want us to talk about? What should we be talking about? We'd love to hear about it. But until then, thank you. Speak to you next week.